On this episode of the Nationwide Real Estate Mastery Podcast, we sat down with Michael Pinter to uncover how to conquer real estate investing in New York. Welcome to the Nationwide Real Estate Mastery Podcast, where we provide actionable steps to help you get your first or next real estate deal. Now, during this episode, you're going to discover exactly how to conquer real estate investing in New York City. For those of you who are new to the show, my name is Shaun Young, today's host, and I love all things real estate. Now, before I introduce you to our incredible guest speaker today, I want to make a request that if at any point during the show you like what you're hearing, please give us a thumbs up or subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. And make sure to take a look in the description of this episode, as we've packed it with thousands of dollars in free resources. Now, today, we have the privilege to learn from a man who has created and maintained a successful real estate business in the most difficult state to do it, New York. Prior to his career in real estate, he was in the mortgage industry for 17 years. But all that changed when he left that business and started his own real estate business. I would describe our next guest as someone who is disciplined, consistent, and persistent. I want to introduce you all to the one, the only, Michael Pinter. Michael, thanks for being a guest on today's show.
Thank you for having me, Shaun. But I just want to correct one thing. You said New York City. Most of my work is outside of New York City and New York State. But what we're going to talk about today is New York really applies to most of the state that's near New York City. So just wanted to get that straight.
Perfect. And I'm sure that helps our listeners out there, because oh man, I live in, like you say, maybe in Long Island, or I live upstate. So yep, this applies to anyone in New York. Now, Michael, before we dive into it, can you give our listeners a brief background on who you are, how you got started, and what brings you here today?
Sure. So we think about my whole career. When I got married back in 1993, I was working as a stockbroker for a Wall Street firm. Then I moved to be a equity trader for a different Wall Street firm, and then I went into a thread business where we were selling thread to people that were making clothes, and then eventually got into the mortgage business in 1997. And I stayed at that company till 2013. It was good until everything hit the fan in 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I probably should have left then, but I stayed longer. And I was sort of dabbling in real estate investment when I was in the mortgage business, because really before 2008, 2009, it was just incredibly easy to get money. That was part of the problem, which caused the crash.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2013, I realized that all my real estate investing dabbling was really working well. I partnered up with somebody that I had been to working with in the mortgage business, who was really good at raising money, and he raised a lot of money for us. And the other sort of mortgage related things that I was trying were not working out well. So I dove into it full time in 2013. And it's been, over 10 years now of doing it full time. And I have to say, I enjoy it significantly more than I enjoyed being in the mortgage business.
That is amazing. Now, Michael, before we dive into exactly how to conquer real estate in New York, you contribute a lot of your success to being a part of a national mastermind called Investor Fuel. Why do you think this has played such a huge role in your success?
So let me explain really. When I started, it was just me and a partner who really knew significantly less than me. He had one really good, smart, incredible skill that we couldn't have started the business without it, which was raising money. But I had been spending a lot more time in the real estate investment world, and I was approached. So the biggest mastermind out there is called Collective Genius, and I tried to get into that, and somebody in my area would not allow me to. So Investor Fuel, which was a breakoff of Collective Genius, I think has really good targeting. I think they found out that I was trying, and they immediately said, hey, and they had just started. I think it was their second or third meeting. Mm-hmm. So why don't you come try us out? And when I went there, it was like a light bulb went off, because what I get from that mastermind groups, and we meet officially 4 times a year, but we also get together probably 2 or 3 times other times a year. So I probably meet with that group 7 times a year. But certainly for the formal quarterly meetings, I get tremendous benefit out of it in a few ways. The first is that you hear other people who have the same problems as you. It's very, very therapeutic and cathartic. I remember one time I went there and my pay-per-click had just fallen off a cliff, and then 12 and at but I didn't say this, but at these meetings, almost pretty much everyone gets up there and speaks and presents and talks about problems they're having or things that they can offer the group. And so I was like dumbfounded that pay-per-click had changed, and then I heard 3 more. I had probably heard 10 people say that their pay-per-click had fallen off a cliff like the same time mine has. So at that point, I knew it was a Google problem. It wasn't a me problem. So that was very, very therapeutic. But the general problems that everybody has in the business, um, hiring people, keeping people, finding good people, the ups and downs of the business where cash flow is inconsistent. Those are things that we all have. And when you hear other people talk about it, it makes you feel a lot better that you're not the only person who's been subject to those things. So that's number one. The second thing I get out of that group is we actually get to solve problems, right? So people say, I had this problem, but this is how I solved it. They find a piece of software, or they find something they can do, or some different method or a process. So that's the most obvious way that you get benefit from these things. You find out something that you just didn't know, right? I found out that there's some lead provider that you didn't know about that's been working for somebody else. You try it and you get leads and deals from it. So that's the second thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing is, I know there's a third thing. The third thing was really talking to people who are on a much higher level than you, and seeing what's possible. I remember the first meeting I went to, there was a woman there from Dallas area who within 2 years had started the business, gotten up to doing 100 deals a month, and had left the business, hired a COO to run the business, and was working the business 2 hours a week. That was something that, but I still think that's like impossible for a man to do. Only a woman can do that because our egos would never allow us to do that. But just the fact that that was possible was something that blew my mind. So when I go to these things and I find people that are doing, $1 million a month wholesaling, these are things that just opens your brain and you realize how small you're thinking. So those are the benefits I get out of it. There are people who like come to some meetings and come to others. For me, I go to every single meeting. I missed 2 because both my daughters got married right around the meetings, like almost the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't go. But for me, it's like oxygen. I need that feedback. And sometimes I go and it's not even the greatest meeting. Sometimes it is great. Sometimes you get one piece of information that can just completely change your business. Sometimes you go and you just hang out with your friends. But but um but for me, it's really helped my business and allowed me to see much bigger than what I had been seeing before. One another thing, and we're going to talk about this more when we talk about New York.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that the way real estate was transacted is the way it is in 49 states. I just assumed it was done everywhere the way I do it in New York. So after talking to people and telling them problems about attorneys or other things we're going to discuss, they looked at me like I had 5 heads, and I realized maybe this is something only specific to where I am. So that was
Absolutely.
helpful. That was helpful too.
You are 100% right. New York is its own entity, so to speak. It's got its own
Yes.
unique challenges, and that is 100% sure. I teach students all over the country, but New York is a state that we do not try to tackle. I'm not a master of New York, so we are very much looking forward to hear what you have to say today about New York City. But before we do that, I've got one more question about that mastermind. So with the
Sure.
Investor Fuel mastermind that you joined, are you part of any other masterminds, or is that the one that does it for you?
So I get approached by other ones. It's funny because as I mentioned, Collective Genius, they contact me all the time to join them.
Mm-hmm.
But then I always tell them, you have to speak to this guy who's in my area who just doesn't allow me to join, and then they don't call me back. Um, I've thought about dabbling in other masterminds.
Mm-hmm.
I went no, I haven't really gone to any others. I occasionally think, but maybe I can go and check it out. But that's really the only mastermind that I'm the only mastermind I'm committed to.
Well, that's awesome. That sounds like you've got you a good circle of friends, and honesty at masterminds is crucial and it's key. So, like you say, you get to hear about people's challenges who are in the exact same spot that you are, and you get to hear about people who are in positions that you didn't even think were possible because your thinking wasn't you weren't even thinking in that realm. Like you say, someone's, we may be thinking, let's go 6 figures a month, and we've got people doing 7 figures in masterminds, right? So it definitely expands your thought on possibilities.
It's a tremendous thing when you see somebody that's done something. I mean, I remember at one meeting there was a woman there from LA. She operated in LA,
Mm-hmm.
and she had just created her own business. The only thing she did was SEO. So she just created a website. She figured out how to draw people into it,
Mm-hmm.
and she had done like 20 deals in 6 months in LA, which is also a very difficult market, very high
Absolutely.
price point. And like she was swarmed by people like, what would you do? Like, and she had no idea that what she had done was anything special. So that's the kind of thing where you just realize, wow, I'm really not thinking about all the ways that I can go get business there.
100%. Like they say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So
Yes.
let's jump right on into it. Let's talk about it, Michael. How are you doing business in New York? What is your main strategy, and how are you getting it done?
So you're saying that, so what do I you talking about how I get business or what I do with my deals when I get them? Is that what
Yep,
you're
yep,
asking me?
yep. Both. Like, what do you do
Okay,
with your
sure.
deals? Do you wholesale them? Are you keeping them
Sure.
for your own portfolio? What's your main strategy there, and how are you accomplishing that in such a tough state?
Sure. So a couple of things. I do probably five deals a month on average, and I probably wholesale half, so 2 to 3 a month, and then I probably whole close on the other 2 or 3 a month.
Okay.
And I either wholetail them, which means I do very little work to it and then put it out retail. That's really one of my main strategies. Or if I have to, I'll do significant work and rehab them. When I first started the business for the first 4 years I was in this, so 2013, 2017, I bought everything at auction
Mm-hmm.
and I gut renovated every house. Right, my dream was to be Tarek El Moussa from Flip or Flop. Right, that was my dream, and I made open concept houses and all this stuff. 4 years into my business, I realized that a couple of things. I realized one, it's very hard to scale up a business that rehabs everything, right? At some point, I think I got up to 17 different properties I was rehabbing, and I wanted to kill myself
All
because
simultaneously, you're running those
yes,
projects. Wow.
simultaneously. It's very hard to do, especially in my area where there's a lot of different municipalities. So you're dealing with a lot of different building departments, and you're dealing with a lot of different contractors, and that became almost impossible. And I started losing money on deals just because I was dropping the ball. At that point, I spoke to somebody named Brad Chandler. Do you know Brad?
Absolutely.
So
Great
Brad's
friend of ours.
exactly a superstar from the DC area, and Brad sort of told me you can't do what you're doing. You want to wholesale, and you want to start marketing direct to seller. For the first 4 years, I did no marketing. I didn't even understand it. The concept of buying a property at a significant discount from a seller was completely foreign to me. The only thing I understood was that if somebody was in foreclosure, I would buy it at the foreclosure auction, or afterwards I'd buy it from the bank. That was what I understood. And he opened my eyes to marketing direct to seller. Um, so since then, I've tried to move towards as little construction as possible. I'll never get to zero, but I don't like doing big projects, right? Sometimes I get stuck with them and I have to. I much prefer I would wholesale every deal if I could, because I think it's an amazing thing to be done at the closing and never have to worry about a building department or a contractor.
100%
Um, but
agree.
but I very often buy the property, do 0 to a few $1,000s worth of work, maybe something cosmetic,
Mhm.
and then I will put it out retail and sell it. So that's really, I'd say half the properties I go to contract on, I close. The other half I don't.
And for our listeners out there, the last portion that he just described, where he says he puts some, $1,000 or so into the property, cleans it up, puts it back on the market retail. That's what he's referring to when he says wholetail. So for those listeners who don't may not know what he's meaning, like what is a wholetail? I've heard of wholesaling, but what is wholetail? That's what a wholetail is.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of a mix between a wholesale and a retail rehab.
Mm-hmm.
But the epiphany moment came. I'll tell you what happened to me. So I really thought. I mean, when I think about how I thought, I'm almost embarrassed. I thought that I'm going to make the nicest house in the area, and everyone is just going to want it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I was think of the ego that I had, that I thought that everyone would want my house, right? There's a billion reasons why somebody wouldn't want the house. They may not like the location, they may not like the setup, they may not like the size, they may not like a million things about it. And so what I said I was doing before, I was buying a lot of these Cape Cod homes, and I was opening them up. I'd have to put up headers and to support the second floor. And what happened on several occasions is the thing that I did that I was most proud of was the first thing that the buyer undid. They would say something like, "Well, I got to put up a wall here." I remember asking a guy why. He was an Indian guy. He goes, "I cook with curry. It's going to stink up the house. I need to close off the kitchen." Another guy told me, "I'm definitely putting up a wall here." I'm like, "Why?" And he was like, "Well, I need more cabinet space." And then what I started realizing is that my own thoughts about what was best for the house are very often not correct. And I was spending all this money and taking all this time and dealing with the things that I didn't want, which was building departments and contractors. And I probably, on almost all of those houses, had an opportunity to wholesale them, where I would do very little, put them out for less money, put them out more quickly because I wouldn't have to wait for the time to do the renovation, and I could make the same, sometimes a little less, and sometimes much more, just putting those properties out at a discount, right? What I had been shooting for 4 years was this ARV, this after repaired value price, which is the tip of the market. And there's always going to be people who want beautiful houses and will pay the top of the market for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I firmly believe, and certainly I've seen this in my market, I think it happens in most markets, there's a lot more people who are looking for bargains, who will take a house that's okay, right? Maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10 instead of a 9 or a 10 out of 10. And if you put it out there 10% below the market, they're going to jump at it and they're going to buy it. I think there's more buyers at that level. And when I started doing that, um, I really saw a lot more success and a lot more, and I was just much more at ease in my business dealing with fewer contractors and fewer building departments. So wholesaling is something that I'm a big fan of. And also, here's something I mentioned. It very often allows me to pay more for the property than any of my competitors, because they're looking at it as I got to put $150,000 into it, and I'm looking at it as I got to put $5,000 into it, and I can offer more even though I need a pretty big spread between what I'm paying and what I'm going to sell it for. The numbers very often work out better for me.
So on those wholesale deals, just so our listeners are 100% clear, are you taking these deals down using a purchase and sell agreement with the seller and then assigning that contract to your
No,
end buyer, or are you buying that deal and then putting it on the MLS?
no, I'm closing on that.
Yep.
I'm closing on it, doing a little work and putting on the MLS.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't. The issue with assigning it to an end buyer is that you can't really assign the property to somebody who's going to get a mortgage, and most of these people are going to go get a mortgage. So
Mm-hmm.
in order for a wholesale deal to work, the property has to be mortgageable, right? So it has to have working kitchen, working bathroom. It can't have a hole in the roof. It can't have something where a standard bank lender won't lend on it. So that eliminates some properties from me doing the work, right? I'm buying something in the next week that's the roof's leaking, the ceilings are all falling down. Like I can't get bank financing on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a situation where I would try to wholesale it. But in general, what I'm trying to buy properties at a price where I can try to wholesale them, and if for whatever reason I don't get good bites from cash buyers, I can wholetail them. Um, so do little work to it, and then worst case, I'll if I can't get what I need on a wholesale situation, then I'll put in more work and sell it for the most. So I always feel like if I'm buying it at a good enough price, I have options and I don't have to worry about it. But on a wholesale property, I'm taking possession of it, doing the work to it, and then putting it on the MLS.
Are you using funding on those deals, or are you using your own money on those?
Yeah, so I have private lenders, I have hard money lenders, I have a lot of options, but yeah, fund
So
I use funding on them.
So for our listeners out there, guys, do not think you have to have the pockets yourself to do these deals. Even if you do have the money, it's plenty of money out there to go get. All right. So I just wanted to point
For
that
sure.
out.
Absolutely.
Michael, how are you actually getting your leads? What method are you using to find these opportunities for your company?
So I've been through a lot of different lead channels. Right now, I'm really almost all my leads are coming from two channels. One is direct mail,
Okay.
and the other one is pay per lead. So I am paying for leads from several services. I was doing pay per click, where I paying Google directly for clicks, but now I have sort of changed my strategy, and I am paying for leads from pay per lead providers.
I love that strategy as well. I use that same strategy, Michael. I love that. All right. So is what would you like to our audience to understand about the state of New York? Why is this such a hard beast to tame? Why are so many people afraid of it? And how have you been successful at doing that?
Sure. So again, the answer to my success is that I really didn't know anything different, right? If someone would have told me when I started that that the things I'm about to tell you are unique to New York, I may not have even started in New York. But I'm going to give you maybe 5 reasons why New York is much more challenging, and
Okay.
then I'm going to give you 5 reasons why New York is 5 advantages to doing business in New York. So the first issue with New York is that a real estate transaction in New York, and it's weird because New York's a big state, right? It's a huge state, goes all the way up to Canada. When I say New York, I more likely mean downstate New York, closer to New York City, right? I operate mostly in Long Island, which is 2 counties right next to New York City. There's about 3 million people on Long Island, right?
Okay.
8 million people in New York City, 3 million people on Long Island. I also operate in the city, but the first thing in New York is a real estate transaction here does not take place between a buyer and a seller like it does in 49 states. It takes place between a seller's attorney and a buyer's attorney. So when a seller agrees to my price, he has to engage an attorney, and that attorney is going to send the contract to my attorney. I cannot whip out a contract and say sign it and be in contract. New York is much more complicated and difficult to get into contract. And once in a while, I'd say 1 out of 100, 1 out of 200 times, those attorneys are going to kill the deal. It happens, but it happens very infrequently. Usually, the attorneys want to get paid, and they don't get paid unless the deal closes.
Indeed.
So that's the first thing. That the sellers are almost always represented by an attorney. I've done a few deals where they weren't, but it's very rare. So that complicates things, right? Because the standard procedure of real estate investors is I'm going to pull out a contract and lock up the deal by
Mhm.
getting the seller to sign. That's number one. Number two is the EMDs, the earnest money deposits that are put down when you close, are significantly larger in New York than anywhere else in the country. So standard EMD in New York is 10% of the purchase price. So if I'm
Wow.
buying something for $300,000, they're going to expect me to put $30,000 down. And um, the contract is not valid until my deposit clears. So it's not like other states where you can write a check and nobody deposits it and it's still an enforceable contract. In New York, the language is very clear that it's not enforceable until the money clears. So for whatever reason, the check bounces, the wire doesn't hit, the seller's not under any obligation, right? It's happened to me that the buyers come in, cash buyer and his check bounced, and it was just an oversight, but I wasn't obligated to assign the property
Perform.
to him
Got it.
until the money clears. So that's number two.
Mhm.
Number three is there are no inspection contingencies in the contracts in New York. So the standard rule of people wholesaling is that I'm going to lock this property up. I'm going to get on the contract, and I have 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to go find a buyer. And if I can't, I'm just going to get out in this escrow period. In New York, and this is only New York. Everything I'm saying is only New York. When a buyer and a seller agree to a price, so if I'm selling a deal, right? So the buyer will immediately order an inspection. He'll get the inspection done before, and any repairs that he wants done, he's going to put into a rider in the contract. I actually think it makes more sense, but it makes it much more difficult to wholesale because every single property that I go to contract on, I have to close on or I have to assign. Those are my only choices. I have no outs in my contract, no contingencies whatsoever.
Got it.
That's number three.
Mhm.
What was number four? There was some more good ones. Well, that's for starters, right? So again, you need money, right? You need money to put down. You can't really control the transaction like you do in the other states, and you really have no way out of the contract. As an aside, of one of the things that is caused by those things are some advantages to New York. So first of all, there's very little competition in New York, right? People are very surprised when I say that. As I said, I operate on Long Island, maybe 3 million people. I think I can count on one hand, certainly on two hands, every single real estate investor who markets direct to sellers here, right? That's not a lot of people. I'm talking about 3 or 4 people. So very little competition. I would say 2/3 of the time when I make an offer, I'm the only person making an offer to the seller.
Wow.
So that's a huge advantage.
That is
Second
huge.
advantage is you make more money on your wholesale deals, right? Because of the size of the property. So I average, I think, over $35,000 per wholesale deal. So, most of the people in the big areas like Phoenix and Vegas and Dallas, they're happy with 8 or 10,000, a lot of them if they're doing high volume. So
Mhm.
you make more money. And also it's impossible because it's very hard to get into contract. It's impossible for the seller to get out of contract in New York. So if a seller would, for example, change his mind, um, and it's happened to me a couple of times. They say, I don't want to sell to you. I want to sell to you for more. I just tell them to call their attorney. In New York, if a seller would want to get out of a contract and the buyer wouldn't allow them, two things would happen. First is I'd be able to file list pendants on the property, the same as if a bank was foreclosing on him, which would prevent him from selling the property to anybody else. And the second thing is I can sue him for specific performance for the entire purchase price. So if I was buying a property for 300, I could sue him for 300,000 and I'll win. So his attorney is going to tell him that, and every single instance where a seller's told me that, after he spoke to his attorney, the next phrase was, "When are we going to close?" So
Absolutely.
those
They're
are
going to
the
move
advantages.
forward.
Yeah. So as I said, it's more complicated. It's difficult, but there are advantages to that difficulty, including, as I said, less competition and never having to worry about a contract falling out because a seller decided not to sell to you.
Bam. Michael, you have given us a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. Let me ask you a question, Michael. What do you think life would be like if you would have never gotten into this side of the real estate and you were still on the mortgage end?
Oh, I don't know if I'd be alive. I might have ended my own life. It was very, very difficult after 2008 or 2009, where I was.
Mhm.
We were the tip of the spear when it came to regulatory control. When the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Board, was founded, they were only allowed to audit banks until they hired a chairman. When the day they hired a chairman, they called my company to audit us because we were a non-bank entity.
Mhm.
And I can tell you that the amount of regulation that they wanted to heave on us was insane. No one there knew what they were doing. They were all new. They just were trying to just throw regulation. They wanted us to hire an outside company to audit us. They wanted us to hire an inside employee to audit the outside company. I didn't even know what was going on, and I couldn't stay there much longer. I just wanted to get out of there. It was very, very difficult. And I know people work in the mortgage business all the time, but I cannot stand this unnecessary and absurd regulation. Which is one another reason why I don't like doing rehabs and I have to deal with the regulation of the local building departments. I really don't like government regulation. And I enjoy the fact that in my business now, there's much less.
Got it. Love it. Love it. Well, Michael, we have come to the part of the show that I call the rapid fire session. This is where I ask you one question or I ask you a question and then you tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how strict were your parents?
6.
Get up early or stay up late?
I'm up very early.
How many hours of sleep do you get each night?
Around 6.
Favorite or last book read?
I'm reading a great book now called Crucial Conversations. I love it.
Nice. Something you wish you were better at?
Whew. Something I wish I was better at. There's a lot of things I wish I was better at. I wish I was better at converting sellers into contracts. I wish I was better at that.
And don't we all, right?
Right.
If you could be any superhero, who would it be?
It's got to be Superman.
Something everyone should do less of.
Watch TV.
Something that everyone should do more of.
Read.
AI technology, scary or the way of the future?
It's probably the way of the future.
Michael, I want to thank you so much for being an amazing guest on today's show, brother. Are there any thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience before we get you out of here? Of course, how can they get a hold of you? How can they reach you? All that good stuff.
Sure. So my this website called Bigger Flips is my website. I'm on Facebook and Facebook. You can reach me at Michael Pinter. Oh, I also have Bigger Flips on Facebook. I have Bigger Flips on Instagram. I have Bigger Flips on YouTube. I have a channel on YouTube. So there's a lot of ways to contact me. I check my messages. I mean, on my YouTube channel, which I post very often. My office number is there. You can call me in my office anytime. The only thing I would tell people is not to be scared of New York, even though it's more complicated. The I think the juice is worth the squeeze. I think it's a good place to operate because of some of the advantages that I mentioned. I didn't mention all the advantages. There are more,
Mhm.
and I didn't mention all the challenges because there are more of those too. But I really believe New York is a good place to operate because of those advantages, despite the
One
challenges.
100% agreed, Michael. You gave us three top, benefits of being in New York, and one of those was little competition. Number two, you make more money, and it's impossible for the seller to get out of the contract. If you've been doing this business for any amount of time, you understand that those are great benefits. So, guys, figure out how to get involved in New York. Michael, thank you so much for being a guest on today's show and adding so much valuable information.
Thank you, Shaun. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, you all have made it to the end of the show. Give yourselves a pat on the back because most people never finish what they start, and you just did. If you got any value out of today's show, make sure you share this with a friend or on your Facebook page. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and send us topics that you want to learn more about. So until the next episode, you can catch me on any one of my social media platforms. I'll see you all on the other side. Make sure you guys go out there and check out Bigger Flips. Talk to you soon.
With this crown on my head, I'm seated on the throne. The top is so alone. Only thing that keeps me going is I know my city love.